The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered into samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way, saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times, by means of Prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Aga samara de Chandara samara yame de adong gade gade paragade parasanga de kadiso alha papa konjo sanji kai de medoji odoji odoji shewadoji ragi baji vete bejo danji jedin koye so ha gere dojo jeju jewa de do beje dan jewa don Samba Junji and Bonzo and Zonjoji Dashi Dejan Dena Dele. I need the mouse. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teaching deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niratayami. Sanye Jadan Ye Janam La Janju Badu Danye Jasuji Dagi Chunye Jibe Zanam Jola Benje Sanye Jubajo Sanye Jadan Sanye Jana La Janju Badu Danye Jasuji Dagi Chunye Jibe Zanam Jola Benje Sanye Jubajo Sanye Jadan Sanye Nam La Janju Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Chinye Jibe Zanam Ji Jola Benji Zanye Drubajo. Okay, so we'll get started with the transmission in 1 minute. I just clicked something and it made the screen leave my PDF. So just give me 1 moment. Yeah, I'm not really sure what I did, but I have technical support along the way. I don't know what I did. I hit the mouse and the whole screen disappeared. Where is it when I need that happens? Let's see. Will this work now? Okay, we're back on track. Thank you so much. I'm so afraid to even touch computers because of exactly what just happened. You know, I don't think it's unfounded. I was doing something, I pressed something I didn't know, and everything just went away. So I don't know. I think I needed to be born like 10 years later because everyone seems to know all of this or something. I think anybody who's like 45 or older is just really in the dark a little bit. That's my theory. All right, everybody, let's get started with the transmission. We're going to begin at stanza 100 today. So just remember, we should set the motivation because this is a Mahayana text that we're listening to this so that we can contemplate this and eventually realize this in meditation. So we're listening so we can achieve the wisdom arisen from hearing, right? So we first have to hear something and then think about it and then kind of meditate much more deeply on it in order to realize these kind of topics, and especially the profound topic that this really kind of penetrates, which is the view of the Madhyamika Prasangika view of emptiness. This being the commentary on Nagarjuna's root wisdom text. We find that root wisdom text is really just looking at emptiness in every single way possible and negating everything that is mutually exclusive with the correct view of emptiness. So if there's any kind of grasping that's still left, an inherent existence, even if it's just believing that there's some subtle kind of defining characteristic, like the Middle Way Autonomy School believes, there's, you know, some kind of defining characteristic that gives an object an ability for me to name it this, right? So it has some essence, but it takes me naming it, and that's incorrect. So that sounds though pretty reasonable, right? When you hear that, and that's why, so I could have given a discourse on that for 10 minutes and why that's accurate. And we have to question our minds whether we would have believed that was the accurate view or not. And if we aren't sure, then that means we really need to delve into the Prasangika school, find out what the object of negation really is, find out what taking the object of negation kind of too far would mean, where we would end up at nihilism, find out what happens when we don't negate enough and we end up at some substantial existence, which we find still in the Madhyamika autonomy school. So when we look at Madhyamaka, the final view of emptiness, we have these two categories, the Prasangika and the autonomy. So the Tengjor and the Tenjorwa and the Ranjupa. And the autonomy school, which is Ranjupa, still has this inherent existence to some degree that's grasped at because of this idea that an object has some sort of defining characteristics that establishes it in order to be named as a car, right? So these parts have carness, but they can never become a car without the name. But that carness is still, and again, I'm not trying to present as if I understand the tenets clearly, but when you start to delve into it, that's what they're talking about. So we have to get to this view where we see a collection of parts that are a suitable basis of designation for a name. And then that naming, that naming that goes on that basis of imputation is the only process into which that becomes a valid object. So somehow that naming on that collection of parts is what allows us then to experience the object as a car, for instance. So we see a collection of parts, a suitable basis to be named as car, why it performs the function of a car if we need it to, right? It'll drive down the road. So then our mind puts that collection together, conceptualizes it and thinks about this and then names it as a car. But those parts themselves aren't the car, right? The name and the definition of the car is not the car, right? So that's what the middle way consequence school is getting at. That's what Nagarjuna's final view is getting at. That's what every view, if it's the correct view, whether it's Dzogchen or Mahamudra or the union of bliss and emptiness or grounds and paths, whatever we're looking at, whatever school it's presenting in, if it contradicts the Madhyamika Prasangika school, then there's an issue, right? And throughout time, we've seen, because we have these tenet systems, authors that took away too much or didn't take away enough, right? And then use this to present emptiness. I mean, there's volumes of wrong presentations of emptiness that we would never ever suspect were wrong if we read them without being scholars, but really wrong presentations of emptiness that I'm starting to look at a little broader picture and asking Rinpoche a lot of questions about this idea of clear light and apprehending it. And, this idea that if we just apprehend this mind, then we're going to be Aryas is wrong, because at death, there's a slight apprehension. We don't die and we're not an Arya at the moment we die. So there's something about the utilization of that basis that isn't apprehending or grasping, that we can then see the ultimate nature of reality through that kind of lens. But that lens itself isn't the sight, right? It's the analysis that allows us to inferentially arrive at that direct perception, right? So it's that analysis, those stages of analysis that allow us to know when we're realizing something, that it isn't just kind of like mental sinking, posing as a realization. And when we look at the stages of meditation and we look at the subtleties and the mental and physical pliancies that take place, there's a lot of pockets in there that one can sit in for a long time and believe that pocket is a realization. And I think that you'll find if you start to really tear apart some of these looser views, right? The kind of looser views that are being like just thrown around, like, oh yeah, just you realize this, and go to a Vipassana retreat weekend and you get single pointed concentration over the weekend. Like all these strange things that are being like thrown around are incorrect when you look at them with the mirror of the Nalanda Pandits, right? And this text here is one of the Nalanda Pandits. It allows us to have a little bit of a mirror. And then Tsongkhapa, right, in our tradition, We have this big, thick book illuminating the intent, the Umagomba Rapsel, that then will clarify it even more, right? And then we have the Ripijatso, the ocean of wisdom, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the Muya Madhyamika Karika. We have all of these texts that are written, that will help us to clarify these things more and more and more. So we can end up, when we eventually realize emptiness, it will be a realization of emptiness. And when we come out of it and the uninterrupted path, right? When we hit the path of release, we will be on the first Bodhisattva ground. And then and only then will we be on the first Bodhisattva ground. We will have been a Bodhisattva. I understand that, an engaged Bodhisattva. But the first ground happens when you're released from that realization of emptiness. Then and only then. And that first ground can be mistaken. It's called the joyous because of the joy of, working for sentient beings, right? So you could come out of that realization, right? And be grasping at the wrong view and have had a completely incorrect experience and then just ran with it and thinking you're getting rid of the greater of the grade obstructions and the medium of the grade and the small of the grade, and that you're really cranking through this path. And you don't even realize you're grasping at like an Atman, right? You have the three highest higher trainings of maybe the Hindu tradition and don't even recognize it. Chenrezig Rinpoche was just teaching the three higher trainings, right, aren't exclusive to Buddhism. There's higher training in ethics, concentration, wisdom. These things aren't exclusive, but they're exclusive when there's this desire to emerge, right? And then the object of observations become different than non-Buddhist schools, right? Only the Buddha taught the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path according to our system. That was the only presentation that has that final view where there's no grasping at true establishment that kind of keeps us from being able to become enlightened. So anyway, for whatever's that's worth, we have to get rid of this grasping at true establishment of the I, of person and phenomena. And then we have to extinguish the self-cherishing attitude and replace it with an attitude that cherishes us. It wants to become a Buddha in order to bring all sentient beings to a state of bliss, to a state of enlightenment. But the recognition simultaneously that you are empty, the sentient beings are empty, and those activities you're doing on their behalf are empty. And that our grasping at ourselves as being ourself is known and truly established isn't any more real than if we said we're them, right? Because neither one's right? Like I'm that person truly established. I'm me truly established. Both are non-existence. Both are not facts. Both are incorrect, right? So imagine if you ran around thinking like that you were someone else really that was truly established or something. Now I understand there is a separate consciousness. I'm not trying to say that everything's one, but I'm just saying that this idea that I'm truly established and that you're truly established, both are completely wrong, right? That this truly established I and other don't exist. Right? So like, I wouldn't be grasping anything more existent if I thought I was you than if I thought that the I exists, if you know what I'm saying. They're both Ribong Ra. They're both rabbits with horns. The existence of the true existence of the I, the true existence of other, right? These two things are rabbit with horns, just like a sky flower. Like the thing that I grasp at all day is just as real as a flower that grows in the sky, right? Or of a child of a barren woman, or of a rabbit with horns, right? All these things. The thing I grasp at is that real, right? Is as real as that. And that's what Chandrakirti is getting at. And he's saying, and Nagarjuna is saying that, listen, there is a final view here that's very subtle. And that's why there's so many volumes written about it. And you've got to just go over it and over it and over it and over it again, because it's very subtle. And because these great masters, who we, consider our teachers, got it wrong. Some of them, they got it wrong. Like, so when we look in the Tibetan traditions, right? they could get it wrong just as easily. So we've got to use the discerning wisdom. We've got to look at the Nalanda text. We've got to look at the Tibetan text. We've got to look at what the sutras say. We've got to look at, make sure this is all concordant. Make sure it traces back to the Buddha. Make sure that that final view matches that final view, and that we're not just hearing something that sounds a little sexier to our ears. So we kind of run with it, because the work is not fun or sexy, really. The work that needs to go on, where you're really in the trenches doing this kind of disgusting practice about who you really are and what you're made of, and all this stuff, right? Where you're going when you die and you're a corpse, and all this stuff is the work that gets us to a place where we can have effort, right? So sometimes it's easier to kind of move on to a more fun topic without having the preliminary practices. And that's why I think it's important. And what I found to be of benefit are the preliminary teachings, right? So why are we attending this transmission? And I'll stop in one moment. Why are we attending this, right? Well, we start at the fact that we have this human basis, but we're going to die, right? We go back to that 9-step death meditation that I think every time we talk about, I miss a step because I'm like wrapped up. So we're going to not miss a step. So we realize that we're going to die, right? So that's the first thing, that the Lord of Death is coming and nothing is going to stop that. We're going to die. George Washington died. Abraham Lincoln has died. The Buddha, passed from this world. Nagarjuna passed from this world. Many of my teachers passed from this world. Too soon in my opinion, but many of my teachers passed. They are not with us. I can't call them. I can't see them. I can't ask them a question about Lorig. Geshe Gompo, I cannot ask a question about Lorig. He's gone. Why would I think I wouldn't be, right? Why would I think I had some stability that a great being like that didn't have, right? So I'm going to die, definitely. And no matter what, I'm heading closer to it, right? I'm heading, the minute that this consciousness enters that mass, right? This consciousness goes from the bardo into the Pami Kutra, the semen and blood, right? This mass that the consciousness lands in. I'm heading towards death, right? Like there's this car that's going down a street and there's a wall. It's going to hit. Now we don't know when we're going to hit it later in this meditation, but we're definitely going to hit it, and we're not going to go backwards from that wall. We're heading towards that wall, and we're going to die. And the things that make everything impermanent, make us impermanent. We are momentary, right? And part of our momentary nature, part of our human basis is that we die and that we're heading towards death. It's not like we're getting extra days as we're moving forward. Time moves forward. So we're always moving closer to the state of death. And then we won't have any time to practice Dharma. So these are the first 3 things. We'll say we're going to, like we really need to. It's really important. We're going to get to that retreat. I'm going on retreat in March, I think. But we don't know if March is coming, right? We don't know, like, if next week's coming. We don't know if the next hour is coming, right? So we have no time to practice Dharma based on that. So that's the first quality. We're going to die. The death, certainty of death is the first category with those 3 things attached to it. Everyone dies. We're always heading towards death. And we don't have time to practice Dharma. Then we realize that on Jambu Viva, where we live in this place, there's other places where you know how long you're going to live, apparently in the world system, right? In the cosmos, there's other realms where I'm going to live 500 years, right? So you can make some plans. But where we live, we don't know when we're going to die, right? Like we're heading towards this wall in this car, right? It's always going towards the wall. And we don't have any idea when we're going to hit that wall and die. We have no idea. Some people die in the womb, some people die at 1, some people die at 5, some people die at 100, right? Nagarjuna died at 900 or something maybe. So, you could maybe stretch it, but realistically 100 years is what we could max out on, right? And somewhere in between there or to there, right? Who knows? We're going to die. The time's not certain. But we do know the second step of the second point of the uncertainty is that the causes for our death are a lot more than the causes for our life, right? Like, it's very easy to die. It doesn't, you know, when we look at all the places in the world we could be, we look at all of the animals, we look at, it's very easy for us to die as a human. It would just take like a tree right now landing on the house and impaling me, and that would be it, right? And that's just like one fluke thing that could happen, but other things could happen, you know, like people have heart attacks out of nowhere. When we talk about this, my grandfather got back from a huge trip with my grandmother. They were in Hawaii golfing, having the most wonderful times of their lives. I mean, we were at a dinner, you know, celebrating it with them. And 2 days later, he went out to mow the lawn. My grandmother came out to bring him a lemonade, and he was dead next to the lawnmower running. Right? I mean, we don't need to look any further than our own lives for these facts about the uncertainty of death, and that the causes for death are more than the causes for life. This was a healthy man in my eyes, you know, that was going to live another long time. And he's like mowing the lawn. He's that healthy, painting his house, mowing the lawn, and has a heart attack, right? 20, 30 years before the 100 we're talking about. And all he did is work his whole life, right? And then got to retire for like 18 seconds, right? Like, that's what ordinary people, they don't like shoot for the moon of liberation. They shoot for like, well, when I retire, I'll be able to relax. Well, as Buddhists, we're like, when we're Buddhas, then we can maybe like slow down, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a different concept because we recognize this impermanence. So my grandfather, you know, was the victim of the nature of things, right? This person that I thought was invincible, that I thought was the strongest man in the world, was dead next to a lawnmower because the Lord of Death came, and, you know, it wasn't fixed when it was going to happen. And it happened right then. You know, we didn't get to have a final conversation. We all have this in our lives, I'm sure. Like, if you've been on this planet long enough, you have this experience, right? Where, oh my God, I can't believe they just passed away. Like, they were so healthy. They got COVID, they got this, they had a stroke, they had a heart attack, they have cancer. She's so young to have breast cancer, right? I mean, we really have to look at our own lives, look no further than that. And then we get to this next fact, which is number 6, is that this body is insignificant. We think this body can like do anything, but cut this open to see how that works out. Stab this, see how that works out. Break this and see how strong this body is, and then watch what happens to this body from 2 years old to 100. Pabunka Rinpoche says, thank goodness we don't just become old instantly. Like, we're young and then all of a sudden we're old, because we wouldn't be able to handle it. Like, you know, our bodies go from this like tank, you know, that can like jump off cliffs, in my case, and do flips, right? So I can barely stand up when I get out of a car, you know, and it seems like just yesterday that wasn't the case. And just yesterday, I thought this body was so significant, right? And now it's just falling apart and disintegrating before my eyes. I mean, just different stuff's happening, and it's just going to pieces, like slowly but surely, right? It's pretty insignificant. So that's the second. We don't know when we're going to die. And then the third major heading is that nothing can help us but Dharma, right? Our friends and relatives can't help us. Yes, a Dharma friend could help us maybe say some prayers over our dying body and corpse. But ultimately, our friends, you know, if we look at, you know, when they're standing over us and we're sunk, our eyes are sinking in, you know, maybe we've lost weight or we haven't, and we're about to die. Not one among them wants to take our place, right? Isn't, you know, it's, oh, this is terrible because of that grasping itself. There may be cases where people really, you know, a mother for a child or something. I don't have that kind of relationship with sentient beings yet, but in most cases, no one would want to switch places with you. They're saying, oh, what a pity it is, you know, but not adding anything to that experience, maybe scaring you more, maybe like all the crying, and now you're even scared more than you were. Maybe your friends and your relatives around you are making it worse for you. right? So we're thinking, well, the only thing that can help me is Dharma. My material things, so that's the first. My material things can't help me. I can have all the money and the gold in the world. I'm laying like my grandmother in her hospice bed. She had a lot of things. She was laying in her hospice bed. Stasha was there, and she passed away. Like none of those things helped her at all. You know, they grabbed her ring off her finger, right? To take, that's what they did. They grabbed the ring off the finger and started making plans for the money and stuff, you know. And I don't think this is like some exclusive experience, like, you know, to talk about. Right? This is what happens. Like, you know, our money can't help us at the time of death. And then the last thing is our body can't help. Our body kills us. We polish this thing, we put makeup on it, we put cologne on it, we do our hair. You know, I had earrings, I have tattoos, and I used to dye my hair blonde mohawk and have gold teeth. I had all of this stuff to kind of fancy myself up and be all these different chameleon-like roles that I presented the world with over time, right? And this thing that I polished will be the thing that kills me. This thing that I held so dear, this thing that I just really, really just thought was so fancy and nice will be the thing that implodes. This great body of mine that I just cling to is going to be the thing that kills me. It'll stop working, and then me will move on. This body stops working, and then all I have is what I did with the Dharma, what I'm more familiar with in this life. I'm at my deathbed, I'm dying. What do I have? What is going to be of value? Well, what am I more familiar with in this life? You know, have I meditated on the fact that I'm going to die, or is this a complete surprise? Right? Is this a complete surprise to me? Or is this just part of the process of life and to my next life that I've been meditating on for years? So it's just part of the next step. Is it like that, or is it terrifying because I haven't practiced Dharma? And that's really what's going to separate us at that time of death, is what we've done in this lifetime with our Dharma practice. And those familiar seeds of virtue, if we can cultivate them, will connect with previous virtues, and then will throw us into a good place, right? Where we'll be able to cultivate more virtuous seeds. And we'll be able to cultivate the virtues that don't have grasping attached to them. And those are the virtues which cause us to become Buddhas, right? So there's something very magical in the Lam Rim that says that like the virtues like cause higher realm rebirth if they have grasping, right? And then you have this ignorance about the nature of reality, right? So those virtues cause higher realm rebirth, and ignorance of karma and its effect causes of non-virtue, right? It causes lower realm rebirth. So it's just interesting. I don't even pretend to be a scholar. I just finding interesting things that are kind of food for thought when we see how important the view is. So this text is about the view. I will now ask Rinpoche to recite the text. Rinpoche, the long long. Hey, that coffee that's
Yeah.
Coffee that's Jede.
世间当机就得超级去国公做过下，这一切都我们就龙三年吧，3年下边过来3路当。
So please listen with the idea that I want to have this transmission enter my mind so that I can become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we should be attending this and listening to this in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, for the purpose of others.
其实主要就东北就南海原来一直都这有时候的买年呐，现在现在今天在把我提示让个老人今天回来，你们是不是？就这个大的刚给确实了，就是说的大的现在买呢，刚来也这么吧，都不等于 都有吧，那今天这到今天他这样的多半就是今天他这样的我吧就是大人的实际上是实际路途他都晓得对大于那边但从流淌在就是刚正中有的人有人开来的事情用完得到原名得到先生的刚给学堂我都让些来到那个来这堂就们他们都能开始提起来马上用完得到大学月吧买一弄刚给学堂那些堂那个来学堂有了嘛对吧没比我那让些这刚给接触怎么都不一天了也不天了有那萝卜大多看完就是其他的人对于那些这些那你到了那你当马进都当咱们来说我们这些吧这些都能怎么全球往给那些别有些大学那时录制现在多半就是给的这么简单这么单呢来种这么买不得没种学校买些困难多把苦马茶劳动人民多把社会开发当然多年多趋近主要就是给的我呢给那我呢年多都买呢他家都要没上不接人知道没把研究提示知道了以前呢要把你搞到哪里签署永久啊这些老师知道马这边人家知道你了这些的现在马里哪里人的路给什么了这些中小学根据学堂免除入园所前面通的原因没从讲去了其他这就是这么的这些都的其他前面讲马上把它康熙几天前同意的那就买一把这一些呢慢的那个包马上不能让给咱那些叫完你多面积单多原本的人我呢跟我年纪阶段的人都嘛这提升的到准备去那个多的事情接着让这些元素两个那把送去吧这些大多教育嘛我说的 대신 도매진 진짜 로도 잡아 요지신 대신 거부 당지 요요하나 뭐로보다 총바 때문에 가지 주면 받아 원수게 줄라 소던 다니니까 뭐는 제발 좋아 많이 봐 지시 때는 로도 저원주로 가지 뭐 때문에 라중에 또반다 답은 문에 봐 대신 대조 대반대는 당한 더하다 저버시 또 너무 유나 좋았대 뭐 제대로 봐 요지시 뭐 보면 봐 너나 뭐좀 빼 배신만 봐 왜 그랬지 수주도는 또 베이징 모두 내주반의 좋아 전주에 또 나로만 좋아 가이데 나버주변 저거 캐나서 대주례제做了 차비서 만지나도셔서 되게 그때더니 나버시바나 제주 집안주는 예밤에 그때 랑이 따라 차다 대신도 제라 따라 초강 또바니 대신 너차 kondu nangse de najo ban nyodo chuaju yamo jena malen jesu la tale jon le tonjo dan ni yudo du jene najo bai dan ko sabu dangwa shebu mebida yade chame medi na ta te jonze la tene medi chen zun ta de jo ma sha pa da chewa dan de she ta jebe dan ne yue me xin ne ne nga ze de do na le la ne ne gu zu de yue me de ka shi ji de ju le ti che medi na che ka de da ge la ra ma ji de ze chen no ba ji shi chen no ku jang yue ma yi这是pombo le jen da me de pombo ma do de ma lu shi je de nga ze de do je de nga ze lu yi de do ya men de je me pa da di shi ka da to no ke mo je zo ba de jang ma je da ne ma do la ma ji de la la jo dong de na pombo le jen da ga me pombo le jen da ru me bi shi da di me ba pombo ko na wu kaji dati tendo pombo de nga cha yun de yang de kaji saji de de pombo da na te shi de ma yi da de te jin ta ja ma bu ju da ne de zu ju xin ta da wa de la ju bi xin je lo me ju ro yang an de se na ba da che ju ro yang an de ko ke ji ta la ne che ji she bu me ba de be je ji sa ju tenye to ju yue na che me na a shi na che de ju la she ji ji te shi pombo Kansen, Dabri, Jeden Tadelasu, Measure. Chujinenju Dame, Tuala, Tesingaba, Tuba Nuro, Tada Yudam, Tada Puna, Tesi Teacher, Chuji Senza, Udamanjur. Chuji Naju Dame, Tuayi, Zuzu Deni, Tuba, Majushin, Zula Mene, Gusha, Zasu, Chenju Te, Mon Tumes, Kanji Tempe, Pombo, Takushi, Soma Teacher, Udan Duna, Tene Pon Le, Jada Gubate, Zoda Major, Dojan Sonsi, Kanji Zosu, Dani Dushe Chang, Maye Dushe, Nami, Nashe Chang, Meba, Dojan Leson, Teacher, Zoda Pombo Dachi, Jemai, Pombo Dachi, Jose, Ponache, Soba Yenche, Pombi Ngomi, Ngami Duan, Ngami Duban, Oba Nijami, Teme Shena, Soba Omain. Tezi Teyi, Yela Tsunache, Tsunala, Shida Nijo, Shida Danda Tsun, Dole Pombo Dene, Yensomba, Teje Pombo Duzan, Damayi. Ishe Nade Zujen Laishira Chula Tada Nida Chenju Che Shansu Suna Dani Jumite Kanshi Tada Iyo Mai Labu Rani Lachi Rigami Tada Nale Tada Nale Shebu Ninju Shebu Jini Juru Shebu Mele Yuena Luyina Mai Kanshi Shebu Mele Kanshi Tube Dati Sachu Me Nondang Nashi Naka Sheshawa Kandu Dana Mesu Zibayi Tendu Tala Tene Nyetenshi Sedang Senshun Chuna Nyezun Ne Tezun Tishi Tene Tena Dang Tene Mayi Suzang Nyemi De Tishi Ngazi Lute Nalami Dame Tusi Tabi Dabonshin Tene Ngazi Tendong Mendeba Tishi Dame Shebe Tatawa Chechang Jishi Hawanshin Tusa Ranchi Tsibu Chune Toshi To Tene Lanshin Meshi Tosi De Chushi Jiba Hawanshin Chima Jishi Nabu Juni To Pombo Dayo Mayi Dalai Pombo Dayo Yume Kanshindir Jeni Yuna Dobande Yuna Jeni Mede Tishira De Dobau Dana Zuden Mendo Kanshida Yume Tishira Dendu Juame Jela Nade 人民苏丹呢，但是说了，你先你们说到马英，但是说的没，说了咱们，到了啊，所以没，这他那是碰跟学校的，这他大多，到完你说的，但是咱们都这一，做到看当，还真正就啊，接触，但是那都难的吧，什么托啊就跟得到。看见等你现在大不大？老师学们搞到这的那些主给，现在真的人，真的俺人带动两百人。看见等你现在大不大？老师学们搞到这的那些主给，现在真的没，真的没，真的俺人这样两百人，俺是全部我不马路边，我叔叔来句没句。大个我们来就满足的，让给多吧，说吧，多不下，出去那些大人，那些老大来人呢，我都叔叔来人，我都人，我不拿把人同着啊，这是咱们，我去当这是，这是俺这，但呢，我不明。我们来人，我们我们，我们单面的人，的单面的人做工，那单做不就是？现在上来了，来人都没，渐渐满意的单，杨美琴，有了蓝莓，有了大豆莓，六百张莓，一枚钱就能。开始收藏，现在就哪能？是不是了？现在就考试有了，现在有了他，买杯一张，现在这把后面确有了，只是还还有就是，之前现在杜老王这些人小孩就吧，知道就知道小孩就吧，知道小孩就吧，知道以后呢，现在有没给达到给的现在你对的，康路说了，一大才有呢，这就拿这样有没的，这些一张现在有没？康熙确实初八章没背，一直有了出现，万一拿康熙这样万一等等呢，那呢艺术知道艺术大学知道就确实的人知道对的，但是每天把一句了，但是呢，这不哪怕每天让人家 他就将人叫我西北去，那人如数的大，那了，网络书，下一上日本满一年，叫我买杯，叔张月明，第一些得到一美里，那是今天多，今天多，今天多，今天多，哪怕对着中间没去，那就买吧，今天年人的让给人了，才能多把一，现在有人来了，现大，最近人了，现在前些年，现在最近写着年。就那了，那不年度中，年的长辈工作忙了，那么对着中就，那么对着蛮康，吃到我，有些难就把一原本年，带着你了，得了就是别，那的准备，这人多不少，现在有你蛮难，这次。原来前面原来讲买，现在在哪原来买不行，路面原来建设原来过，这些阶段长辈碰不到，抗党，这些主带人大讲鸟啊，那把年懂得年来来那的些方面，我不有名，现在呢，阶段每天年名，这人几名，到了大半年了，说吧样，有名的人当然人名，这个大多不能安静了，说的说人，这可以的，安静论中有的等安静的路，终于到的呢，马大茶吧，这么马了，马一我是学过买这来买吧，这是大堂，他们把有名，这些大堂，大给动的心，那就把那么做就，我把那不是在骂他，希望决心党，看见现在全党人来老说，我能给这些搞到过难，就是也把都晓得看是多，才能今天而且做门子
切入这个
有点，就像前进党人不行，说 有的这有了，这恰当才是没了，做的，等到现在那这些呗，那就要把满意，他那些都就把今天准备过年要把一给他去这把下去，这他的就没给他说不这不买些男的，他们就没见都就了，这不样的就拿这完就第一是刚来刚是就把刚是来我就啊。给他确实就有这能，这不这现在第一次，他女吧，这边这不他的满足行，说男的，军的居民，那等吃吧，满足了，一般都大不能，都把人啊，要把就了，这的确实就有这不，这把那些提醒者写上。有名人就是有名先有榜，考试得到念下杨人就嘛，当着第时到了就们就今天把一我不拿奖面，去年带孙又让马车，年的马车把也许的人去了杭州啊，马一闹。给他这个发现，老是困难，那种吧，这是确实，这就算呢，这把就没，可是让给去了行他话，从把大学这日本人吧，我到他了，我的这些去了就当面，基本就行，好给是去了上学买呗，所以许多过往。所以白村就是把这孙人这些党让的这呢一些，还是也把那讲了，哪怕说了就是到了说的也把没别，他就完的呢，是满意，其他确实你们辛苦来有，七八能人家来呀，肉中老鼠，那是痛了，你们当然，人家那把铁党，马这把，我这边去，电呢，他家上学用就行，每天进懂，然后给他确认，这不这是，他呢，也不知道，人，这呢， 싫어도 시원샤라 너가 통한 좋아 텐신은 티베탄 대장 로자 도시 쉐바샤 게데랑기 로자 거기 텐시 모두다 모스 고자 니주로 루비모 뭐 여마 여주나 체발라수 제바니와 저 주지나 대야 여바 메베 최지 세제 맞이 뭐는 다다 뭐 보면 또 여봐 나바 첼라 제다 대다 아직 제다라 공도 쉬봐 달라서는 또 번에 많이 또 내배 자연제대 제대 내주시
정신 라모
虽然他们共同要把羊的谢谢呢，吃饱了书，确实难度切多，在当下，所以前途我不养，其他人民，这个那些他们说的日子都不下，他们的人如果拿这些，说的我在也那你说，他的准备太阳的人呢，有些那个是的，那么说。做的结吧，我把你做的结，我把你做出现在都就能太阳这些得到的，提前多样也把康心对于让人的也是没能没个动，这些那往他等这留到一张念不下，他说那把满一当，这把满一你是没了说过主会议，让人每年可以那能拿动有的多，康熙对于让人的也是康受呢，自己动，这等之后，这家当去年年纪这些弄，说来年买把年，去了东把年的年下上去，每年呢，去到东把年的去到上去，买把年，特别东把年之下，哎，多年这样多年前，没有东把这把位，多年学习，多年康，多年多的多年我不见得落见这，这把都是什么？现在那些记得呢，马路桥也是当常备 我在于买起书呢，钱不你，那他就像书到去多把你抗议的，钱不多把你抗议的，钱不在吧，都这些都是真的不吧，出人边，当两个人来吧一，真的东尼扛，真的东尼的，两个人的路我比这路见去，这把都是山是，等到前边，我把同把年都点不在，这类熊是抗松不，有些人把200年，真的可以东尼扛，有些东把你扛了这年没大年，这大年把对嘛些，真的可以东尼扛，真的对嘛些东西，扛了他呢也没法，这了他来那边就真的可能东把你，他来那边东尼人，托马党部，他这大没法，后来托马党嘛，没法就容这些，没让对，现在对于爱你讲，真的托马党他嘛，没法东把你都写，但就来呢，俺把的人，多学生，托党，我党呢，俺把党，对面东，俺把在，俺有对面抗议保护，多俺把的人去，这人多年，东把你抗议，这是这是这得学呢，对面吧，东把你这小孩就留日老叔，我你可是。罗马老上去也是这些学那些蛮子这些人留意了，除了那些模拟，让人都见不得，这人东人刚有也刚有，真的让人东北人抗拒结党、日周党，这类属苏州党，如今人民见这人有些他妈是去弄。去得了唐这些，知道给人多年考，注重了书，我没考，真的让他东北人，入前几天，初二牛油， 다니 이제 tsama 데바데 이제 뭐반 이제 뭐 일어서서 나리바 나제라기 세니도 부모 등에 하여튼이 카나다니 주도도 제시 나는 사제제 제우거주 예도송 대진저와 용왕 저는 너저 전이도 동안 예배 파르신 추진 동안 전이수 좋아 전이 순주제 카나마도 여러분이 사대 예배 전이제 실 참에 전이대 파르신바 주나제 전이들아 임해주 사대 나다 세메다 대신 제가 좀해봐 저라양다 첨바이 맞추천이见도중小주 수든小주 자든 매번 저주 셰랑트니 도마지 천이데 매번 나이니 천이 매번 신이데 소미 천이 동에 나도 매나 타나지 천이 나봐 주시고 또는 신도 나바네 때라 법에 가지 손 조비 이제 바나나 신도 때바 뭐이 수수양다 제나나 온수 세메 천이제 졸라 펜바 예주바 샤마 쳔보 셰자우 등에 제나 준주바 용주바 토지 쳔비 가와드 여기 있으니 다녀네 만데 천이 제시사 서지 추는 만데비 조당 제도 강도다 가시 던데 어초바 대시 주 어초 천이 나도 chen 이제 무슨 천이 제도는 얘는 이제 완전히 이제 무슨 세상 만들도 아니 이제 천이 다 요마시비 천이 뭐 그나 저도 그나 동반이 저는 라차 동반이 다다와 이번에 때도 마음 여마이 어디서다 매매 봐 저라 매매 봐시주 매매 봐대 그러면 대 해봐 얘가대 Tuzo Mai, Demi, Meme, Shiji, Konido, Chele Shunshi, Monala, Deba, Baye, Nome, Deba, Anna, Teji, Tony, Nome, Tonido. Mabi Janan, Luduna, Pomana, Jebai, Tana, T, Tonika, Mabutomanich, Luduna, Mamaki, the Mashi, the Mame, Tony, Mabu Meba, Tonito, Rajin Mo, Yemete, Raji, Shi, Tony, the Raji, Majebe, Raji, Shena, Shaji, Sajinana, Shuang, Majon, Ron, Nonana, Monaji, Tomba, Jeji Mobu, Rodoja, Yanda Tata, the Teji Mobu, Tonito, Shiro Paru, Shizule, Tadataki, Rodoja, Tata Ludu says, Hawatush, Rangi, Lana Nebi, Churu Rajindo, Saison de la Malu, Dune, Chimba, to the Tanya Davidus, Go, Ubalu, Tatu, Guba, Toba, Sane, Image, Joamame Pala, Tizichibashi, the Mondishi, Sonji, Sonji, Deji, Na, Malu, Lui, Naba, Sheba, Kodu Deni, Shrankabu, Jejuba, Mabi Jebutan, Mabai, Nudu Dana, Shudu, Jayu, then just Parachuta, Omala Jubal, Sanjiva, Chubo.
Okay. So that concludes the 6th chapter. We're going to end there today with the transmission. So we got through all the, I think, 226 stanzas, right, of the 6th chapter are complete. So we started at stanza 100. So we did 126 stanzas of transmission. So yeah, it's just such a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to receive this transmission from Rinpoche, who, when we look at the lineage, it goes all the way back to Chandrakirti, right? So that's the power of the blessing of the lineage of getting this transmission. Means that Chandrakirti taught it to someone who taught it to someone who taught it to someone, or gave the transmission, should we say, to someone who gave the transmission to someone. And then it eventually ends up with us. Rinpoche received it from the previous abbot of Drepung. The Rinpoche, the Chan, the Umagombarasa, the Umajuba Long Su, the Cha, Khensur Rinpoche. Jerung Khensur Rinpoche from the Lama Losaling Kempo. Okay, so it was a previous abbot, Jerung Losaling abbot. I was trying to find like all of the abbots' names, Losaling, so I could see kind of the order where Khensur Pema Jetson is, is Khensur Pema Jetson, the Drepung Losaling, the Kempo, Lo Gatsi, Jonga. So 15 years, Khensur Rinpoche was Rinpoche's teacher, was the abbot of Lhasa Ling in Tibet and then into exile. So when we look at the lineage of teachers that we come from, they're really, when we read these stories about when they were in Tibet and they come into exile, and the junior tutor and the senior tutor of His Holiness, and all of these great teachers His Holiness references in the teachings are all Rinpoche's teachers. So His Holiness teachers and Rinpoche's teachers in the Galupa system are almost the identical teachers. Khensur Rinpoche, and then Gen Nima, Shapo, Khensur Gen Nima, and then Ling Rinpoche, Trijung Rinpoche, Zong Rinpoche, and then all of his the other teachers that we hear of also. So this retired abbot of Lhasa Ling, now we hear is where Rinpoche gets the transmission of this. So it's really very, very profound. And there's many other teachers that we can list within this. From where he was in Kham, again, his two teachers, Ape and Gen Ngawang. And then when he got to Lhasa Ling, many teachers, again, Ruzir. Then the Lhasa Ling, the Chugen Mingare, the Gen Ruzir down. Lacha, then Gen Lacha, was also a great master. Gen Lacha, Go Kamsen Drapa. He was a great master of Go Kamsen, who was also Rinpoche's teacher. Go Kamsen has really produced, when we look at the different Kamsens, some really great scholars who, the head of the dialectic school was after Gen Lobsang Gyatso, Gen Damchu, who was a Go Kamsen monk. The Gen Gyatso, who was the abbot of Lhasa Ling, was from Go Kamsen. Rinpoche was the abbot of Namgyal from Go Kamsen. Gen Lozang Dundrup is now teaching the nuns in South India. And then again, the Kempo, the Go Kamsen Ani Kempo, Suchim Gyatso. And then also I believe the abbot of Dromaling, I'm sorry, he's passed on, but Suchim Gyatso. Suchim Gyatso, who was the abbot of, I believe, Dromaling nunnery. So we see that this kind of generation really produced some very, very great scholars from Go Kamsen. And there weren't very many to choose from, right? At that time when they came over and when, they got out of Buxa, the prison settlement where they were living as refugees, they got to Drepung. There were a handful of great scholars. There weren't a ton of them. We would probably think, when we think of what a scholar is, right? We may think there were a lot more because there were, more people. They debated and stuff. But when Rinpoche and Geshe Gompo, right, spoke of, and Geshe Gompo, I'm so sorry, he was the discipline master at Drepung for 2 terms because the Dalai Lama thought he did such a great job as discipline master. And they don't usually do that. That was a very odd thing for him to give him a 2nd term as discipline master. So when we talk about masters like Geshe Gompo and Rinpoche and Gen Gyatso and Gen Damchu, and when we say, there weren't a lot of great scholars at the time, what we would consider scholars were around, right? But what they consider scholars, right, like the top 1% in the world of debating the Lupa Buddhists is a little different. And you even, when I lived in India, and got to speak with some of his peers or, some of the monks that, were around during his time. They told stories like he just was like this, Rinpoche was this unstoppable. Even the other ones who I'm saying were famous, that I met all of them. Gen Damchu, I met in the dialectic school before he passed. And then Gen Lozon Dundra with the nuns. And Gen Gyatso was my friend, the abbot of Drepung. And they would all talk about Rinpoche with this reverence, this like almost fear would go into their eyes when they would talk about the way he debated. And at the time when he took his final Geshe examinations, there wasn't really any kind of debate as to who the greatest scholar in the world was at that time. And the Dalai Lama came up and appointed him a senior teacher, brought him right from like the South India Geshe examinations, wherever all that was taking place. Then he asked him to come to Dharamsala to be a senior teacher and asked him if he could kind of reshape the curriculum and make it more focused on debate and analysis, and still coupled with the tantric rituals that the Dalai Lama's monastery is needed for. But the Dalai Lama felt that he wanted to see more push towards this. And it wasn't that there weren't great scholars. Demalocha Rinpoche was the abbot before Rinpoche. Gen Lozan Nima, who was the Ganden Tree Rinpoche, who became the head of the Galupa lineage, was the abbot before that. It was just kind of a change in thinking that took place, and Rinpoche really brought that to the table at Namgyal in India, and then brought it to us, right? And brought it to us in a way that it was palpable, it was, palatable for us, in a way of like very basic cause and effect logic, without straying like left or right. That's what I really appreciated about this journey, is that wherever I was, it always lands back in this very, very stable place that Rinpoche kind of guides us through. It doesn't have these extremes. There's nothing mystical he's going to like present to us. We're not going to get here on a Sunday and suddenly hear about, completion stage or something. We're going to hear about like what we could actually accomplish and what we could do with our lives, right? What's tangible? What is something that we could apply to our life and make a change? And I just really appreciated that about this particular, path or whatever you would call it that I've been able to be part of. And I appreciate you all making it possible for me to be part of it. Because when we study emptiness, right, there isn't a teaching without the student, and there's no, right? And if there's a teacher teaching, you could argue they're teaching celestial beings. But if they're just in a room, like talking, are they just talking to themselves? They're not giving, it takes a student to be there, right? Class, kind of, when we define what a class is, there's a students and then there's a teacher, right? So class doesn't go on without this dependent relationship. And I really appreciate that you are all making that possible for me to do this, be named as translator or whatever, interpreter, and you're named as student. And I think we're all really students, which has been really fascinating. So thank you. Any questions? We'll go off Zoom after, and I don't have any updates, so. Stasha has Ngelagi.
Geshe, thank you for the teaching, for translating. I had a question. I was thinking about last week when you were talking about Lama Tsongkhapa, or actually the Buddha emanating someone who doesn't have like the full complete view of emptiness, and basically emanating as someone who lacks intelligence in certain areas. So I was wondering if the Buddha the emanation body experiences suffering, because from what I understand, the Buddha doesn't experience suffering, but does the emanation body project the image of suffering?
The Rinpoche, the Longku, Truku, the Truku, the Ngatsu Tona, Dungyao Yorube, Truku Dungyao Yorube, Yomari, Yene, the Ngatsu Le Jongwa, the Tona, the Kon, the Sanje Shiesan, Ngatsu Tonson, the Ngatsu Le Jongwa, Sanje Le Jongwa. Nyamdu, Yene, Sanje Shiesan. Dene, the Kon Dungyao Yorube. Okay, so the emanation body doesn't have suffering, but we can, from our karma, experience it to have suffering, and can be emanating as it is suffering, but the Buddha isn't suffering. So the Buddha isn't experiencing any suffering because the Buddha has transcended suffering. The Buddha doesn't have the causes for suffering. The Buddha can emanate something to tell a story, right? If we're talking the emanation body in this case, if it's telling a story of suffering, right? Like if we believe that the Buddha's life story is a Mahayana teaching, the Buddha was just emanating this whole thing where he sees someone dying and he sees someone sick and says, oh my God, I'll go do something extreme, right? Like all of these things, he's emanating a teaching. He's showing with actions the Dharma, right? In a way, he's showing a path in some way to bring sentient beings to a state of enlightenment. So the emanation body only comes out in order to ripen sentient beings, right? And it will come out in any way it needs to do that. If a sentient being needs to learn about suffering, then the Buddha will say, I had suffering. When I looked outside of my castle walls, I saw someone sick and didn't know that was possible. And I saw someone dying, I didn't know that was possible, right? So he's teaching all of these ideas of the pathway through this emanation body, if we're looking at it the Mahayana perspective. But the Buddha is not experiencing, when we look at the omniscience, right? And the compassion and the omniscient mind that's making an enjoyment body, that's making an emanation body, that's all one consciousness that can't experience suffering. But it can emanate anything, right? It can emanate anything that needs to be emanated. But then I said, did the Buddha die? And Rinpoche said, yes. And I said, well, was that just the people's karma? And he said it was both. The people having the karma for the Buddha to not, no longer having the karma for the Buddha to be there. And then the Buddha not being able to change reality, right? The Buddha can't wash away our sins with water, right? The Buddha can't remove suffering with his hands. The Buddha can't impart realizations onto us. The Buddha teaches that liberates us by teaching the truth. So the Buddha can't change our perceptions, can't make us, we experience what we experience. And if we don't have the karma to see the Buddha in this world anymore, the Buddha can't have the karma to make that happen. He can't change our karma and make it so that he can still present to us in the way he did before and never die, because we don't have the karma to see that. If we had the karma to see that, the Buddha would live forever, because the Buddha, there would be that cause and effect relationship, right? Like the Buddha wouldn't pass. If we still needed help and we didn't have the karma to see the Buddha pass, then the Buddha would emanate as somebody that didn't pass, right? So for whatever reason, which is beyond our capacity, the Buddhism, makes these decisions, right? Or, then there's an argument, is the Buddha making decisions, or is it just forced by compassion and not free will, right? We can go deep into that, but right, the Buddha's making decisions, if you will, to help sentient beings and however that's possible. But the Buddha can't operate really outside of the framework also of where he or she's emanating, right? Because it's the karma of the sentient beings to see that beings live 100 years or so, right? That in that world that I'm creating, that's the max lifespan. So the Buddha can't work against my karma, because that's karma. The Buddha is not more powerful than karma. The Buddha is under the kind of control of karma, him or herself, right? In a way. I mean, not in a way. The Buddha is under control of his or her karma. It's just all good karma and all compassionate karma that's forcing the experience of all good things and omniscient things, and can't be reversed because there's no ingredients in there to reverse it, right? But the Buddha is still, the question comes up, could the Buddha not help sentient beings? If he or she woke up one day and just had that idea, I'm not going to help sentient beings today, does the Buddha able to do that? That's something that would be debated. I would say no, if there are sentient beings, I would say no, but I don't know, that's something that could be debated and asked and thought about.
Is that the power of enlightened activities?
Well, yes.
Okay, Tu Chen, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, so the enlightened activities. When we look at the excellent qualities of a Buddha, we have the excellent qualities of the Buddha's speech, body rather. The Buddha's body has these 32, right, major marks and 80 minor marks that all have these incredible qualities. And the Buddha's speech, the Buddha can emanate all of these bodies, right? And can make these bodies into anything. And the Buddha's speech, he or she can answer all the world's questions with one response in all of their languages, right? So the Buddha has this quality of omniscient speech, if you will, right? But it's like a power. It's omniscience with power behind it to be able to push that, like, okay, I heard all these questions, I'm omniscient, and I have this power to be able to answer out of compassion. And then the Buddha's mind has this quality of being able to realize conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously. The only being's mind who can do that, right, is a Buddha who can see conventional and ultimate reality, whatever that would look like, right? Simo, without having to rely on signs or reasoning, without having to think about it. The Buddha just cognizes it all at once, right? And because ultimate and conventional reality or existence, right? This is phenomena. The Buddha cognizes all phenomena simultaneously. Because conventional and ultimate truth are phenomena, the Buddha cognizes it simultaneously somehow. And also the Buddha has this quality of compassion and concern for others, right? So the Buddha not only knows everything, but has concern for all sentient beings. So it does something about it, right? Does something about like the plight sentient beings are in because of this loving concern and this knowledge of reality and diversity. So the Buddha has this quality of mind, and then the enlightened activities allow the Buddha to just do everything that kind of breaks our idea of what is possible, right? Emanating bodies, sending lights out, right, to bless sentient beings in some way, just being able to give a teaching to every sentient being, right, at once, if that sentient being had the karma to receive that, right? So that's the tricky part. And that's why we have to create these conditions and we have to create these connections in order to have these kind of blessings and have these emanations be able to kind of work their enlightened activities on us, right? So it's like these enlightened activities, they're not omnipotent. They can't just bend reality in our reality. They can bend kind of physics and do things that don't seem possible and fly and turn gold and water into gold and iron into gold and water into whatever, right? Nectar. Like they have like this ability to do something weird with the elements, right? But there's just, in terms of their manifestations, right? And how they manifest their emanations. But in terms of our abilities, they can only kind of tell us what to do to get to that ability, right? So they dangle this thing in the 10th, the end of the Madhyamika Avatar, like, oh, the Buddha can do this, and that first ground, second ground, third ground, fourth ground. If you could imagine the fifth, imagine what the sixth is like, and then the seventh, and then kind of dangles it in front of us, and then we start to try to work towards those qualities. So I don't know, but that's what I think, and that's what the Rinpoche is saying, that the emanation body doesn't suffer. Now, does it appear to suffer? Yes, but suffering is something that is from the mind, right? It's at the root. When we look at what's driving when we suffer, there has to be a mental consciousness that's cognizing, hi, I'm suffering and this stinks. This feels like suffering. Like there has to be that part. And the Buddha's mind's never like, wow, this hurts, that the Buddha doesn't have the ability to hurt. There's also a whole debate. Can the Buddha see does the Buddha see something disgusting and because that's an unattractive thing. Like that's not bliss, right? Does the Buddha just know what kind of is because he's omniscient? Like that's a big debate. Like does the Buddha see there's this whole thing there's pus, nectar, and blood. Pus, nectar, and water. Like a human sees water. I guess hungry ghost sees pus. A god sees nectar. It's all this same pool. Well, what's the Buddha seeing? Is the Buddha's knowing that one's seeing that one's seeing that, and that one's seeing that. Great, but what's the Buddha seeing? We can get what the Buddha's seeing, they're seeing, because the Buddha knows what their imprints are manifesting. But then what's the Buddha seeing, right? So that's one question I've had for a couple decades now. And I guess it's irrelevant. Like it's better than this. Like I believe it's better than this. So it gives me hope to keep going. But what's the Buddha? The Gnana Trewa Jason, the Yida Cha Da Na Tongdu, Me Chu Tongdu, Then Hla Du Tsi Tongdu, Sanjay Gari Tongdu. So Rinpoche says the Buddha sees nectar. Then they do see they chu do see yambata. Chu tamche. Okay. Yeah. So I was saying, so you're saying the nature of everything is of all water is nectar. So it has some final anyway. So that's anyway. So that's a question, right? Like, is it the same nectar a God sees? The dutsi ton, sanje dutsi ton, the dutsi ton chipa. Yine the chishin the dukan la, the sanje, the sanje ton yagamare. Ninjeo mare. So my question, so he was saying, I said, so what a God sees, the Buddha sees. He said, yes. I said, the Buddha can't see something nicer than a desire around God. So anyway, right? So this is what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to just be blind, dumb people as Buddhists that don't question anything and say, all right, okay. Oh, is that what you said? All right. We're supposed to, when these doubts arise, rip the blind faith off and say, I got to tear this apart until I believe it, right? Like I've got it, because these beings like are teaching these things that seem to be true all the time, but this thing kind of doesn't sit right with me, right? So I've got to tear it apart, and that is okay. That is what the Buddha wants us to do. As the Buddha expects us to cut and rub the gold and question things and wonder why. And, that's how we get to see emptiness. We have a doubt about whether things truly exist or not, right? We have this doubt. And then Arya Davis says it shakes cyclic existence when this doubt arises. That's just doubt. There's doubt that tends towards wrong, doubt that's equal, and doubt that tends towards the truth. Arya Davis says if you just have this doubt, like, wow, I think cyclic existence might not be truly established, but it probably is, right? Like, even if you say, well, but it probably is, you still rocked samsara because you said, maybe things are not truly established, but they probably are, right? You've started to move the pendulum towards, well, I think they may be, or they may not be. Well, they probably are not truly established, but I have a doubt. They probably aren't. And then you start to move towards valid cognition, right? You start to move through this, you're assuming things correctly. You don't know why, right? And then you're having this, leads up to this part where you analyze it. You have a correct sign to prove it's true, and then you directly realize it, right? But you have to kind of go through these stages and you have to arrive at a correct sign that's not controvertible, like that makes things are not truly established and it's not controvertible. That correct sign that you can have at all times that says, because of this, that just negates everything's inherent existence immediately, and then you can realize it. But until you analyze it to the point of that incontrovertible wisdom that relies on a sign, you won't be able to directly perceive it. So that's the stages of kind of wisdom and understanding. But it's a big ocean out there, Alessandra. And I don't ever want to pretend that I have some I know there's no other, right? Like there are a lot of different types of Buddhism. There are a lot of traditions. This is the particular tradition that I've been absorbed in that also analyzes other traditions and interprets other traditions. But I just want to make sure that everyone is clear. My training has been in the Gelugpa tradition. And so when all of these stances, right, which I hope are stances of the Nalanda tradition, because that's what I believe. That's why I believe in this tradition, because I believe it most closely resembles the Nalanda tradition of debate and analysis and Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti. But it's not to say that there's some lock on it. So I don't want it. Whenever I say these things, I'm always quoting Tsongkhapa. I want to make sure we're not saying this is some sectarian only way, like some Shugden party, right? But I'm saying that this is what I've found to be, for me, the most mind-changing and the most accurate in terms of what the Indian Pandits were presenting. Alessandra?
Yes. First, thank you for the teaching and thank you for being here, and happy holiday of giving thanks. So my question goes to your initial commentary when you were referring to many things, but there was a statement about, I can't remember the term you used, so I'm going to use Bodhisattva. So
Okay.
if at the time of my death, I'm a Bodhisattva, I have attained, let's say, because you said something about, and I'm going to use the word Bodhisattva. So I don't become a Bodhisattva at the time of death, but I'm asking, so if in my lifetime I attained, and I have to use it in terms that I can relate to and understand, so I'm going to use common day schooling. So if I attained the commencement of preschool Bodhisattva ground, at the time of my death, I take that with me, and then my next incarnation can either be, and this is a question, can either be mastering that further so that I'm solid in that level, or going further, depending on what's in the best interest of all sentient beings. Yes, no, maybe.
Okay, the con triwa de con de chekalama. Then the jewa shemadro. Then shanchu semba mayena, the con semche mena. Then gare penshu, the jewa shema. The say the con semche lojung shena. Yene semche majena. Jewa shema jegrube. The jewa de nga the semche lojung she. Yene the semche the yomar semche jegmar nga lojung she. Then the nge the lojung she the jema the semche gi ju. Yendire. Then tanda nga semche lojung she the juje menga don dashen yamje lojung she. Yene nge sanchu semba macha. Then the nga cheka lama nga shanchu semba yomare. Jewa shema nga the say de lojung shewa. Jewa shema the semche ju drorbe. Then the nga tsu cheka lama the semche mena gare pen the molanja. So when we do practice in our lives, right? So we're practicing at whatever capacity we're practicing at.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume I won't be a bodhisattva. Let me break down some terminology real quick. I think that's the best thing.
Yes, please.
So a bodhisattva, right, is a being who has bodhicitta, right? What is bodhicitta? Bodhicitta is a mind that wants to become a Buddha. That's the easiest way to explain it. So it's this mind that aspires to be a Buddha. And it isn't just like, I'd really like to do that. It's day and night, everything you're doing, is for the sake of other sentient beings. So you want to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Once you have that in your mind generate, you're a bodhisattva, okay? No need to go more terminology than that. So once you generate bodhicitta, right? You generate this mind that aspires to enlightenment. You are called a bodhisattva. So how does that happen? We'll just real quickly go over what's called the 7-point cause and effect, where you meditate as a pre-step on kind of that our friends, enemies, and neutrals are equal, right? And then we kind of meditate that they've all been our mothers. We remember their kindness. We wish to repay their kindness. And then we develop what's called love through the force of this attraction to them, where we wish that they have happiness and the causes of happiness. And then from that, we realize compassion, which wishes that they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And from that, we realize an extraordinary attitude that says, let's take it on ourselves to do that. From that arises this idea that I can't really bring sentient beings to a state of happiness that's free from suffering. Only a Buddha can participate in that at the highest level. So then you want to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Once you realize love, like have day and night, you want sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Then day and night, you want sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then day and night, you want to become, free them. And then day and night, you want to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. So these are all realizations that happen along a person's pathway. And there's many, many realizations before that, right? Before you want to help others, you have to think that you want to get out and understand the plight that you're in. So all of these things lead up to what's called Bodhichitta, the mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, that's stable. It's a mind. Chitta in Sanskrit is mind. Bodhi is Buddha, Buddha mind. So it's this thing that doesn't go away. Like the Bodhisattva at all times is doing everything for sentient beings, right? So that's a huge realization. Once that Bodhisattva goes through a long period of processes, if they're a dull capacity like Bodhisattva, and they sees emptiness, then they're on the first Bodhisattva ground. So a Bodhisattva on the first ground, when we say that, first ground Bodhisattva, and Bodhisattva, if someone's a Bodhisattva, it doesn't mean they've been on any of the grounds. But if someone's on the Bodhisattva grounds, they're a Bodhisattva. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
if someone's a Bodhisattva, it doesn't mean they're on the Bodhisattva ground. And if you say posit a Bodhisattva that's not on the Bodhisattva ground, you say a Bodhisattva of dull capacity that's on the path of accumulation, a Bodhisattva of dull capacity that's on the path of preparation. These are all pathways where they haven't seen emptiness yet, but they're Bodhisattvas. They're working towards the place to see emptiness and become superior Bodhisattvas, Arya Bodhisattvas. An Arya Bodhisattva is a Bodhisattva who's on the first ground or higher. It means a Bodhisattva who has seen emptiness.
Okay.
So when we use all of these words, so Bodhisattvas are beings that just want to help all sentient, become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. First ground Bodhisattvas have seen emptiness. Therefore, they are Arya Bodhisattvas. They are superior Bodhisattvas. So that's the terminology. So what we're doing and what I'm trying to do in this lifetime is cultivate a desire to get out of the lower realms that is really, really strong, right? That then also in that next kind of step after I want to do that, looks at the downfalls of the higher realms, right? And sees it as a human and as a God we suffer too, and then wants to get out of that. So this is my process. So I want to try to get to the point where I want to get out of all of those realms of cyclic existence. And then I kind of turn my attention towards others and recognize that, like myself, who has the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering, all sentient beings also have this. You know, the person that I love more than anything in this world has this. And the only thing that can make them not have that over and over again is if they're Buddhas. And the only one who can like show a person how to get out of their samsara is a Buddha. So I'm kind of handicapped, right? So I'm in this lifetime trying to get out of cyclic existence for myself and using that knowledge that I've learned about myself to turn towards others and want to get them out. So it's a process of meditating through these stages of self-awareness, awareness of others, and then a kind of a commitment to take on, you know, the job of helping others, right? To get to a point of happiness that's free from suffering. But this doesn't happen all at once. Like you say, kindergarten, I mean, I don't even know if I'm in kindergarten yet, right? So it's something that happens very gradually. And that we, at the time of death, Rinpoche said, we have this good mind, right? At the time of death. And we've, you know, cultivated these kind of causes for bodhicitta. It'll link with other positive imprints, right? And it will be a cause for us to like pick up where we left off, if you will. Not that clearly. It won't be like, all right, here I am. All right, so I made it to love through the force of attraction 10 lifetimes ago. It won't be clear like that, but you'll start to meditate on love and all of a sudden it'll just be very clear, right? It'll somehow, it will connect. If you had realized love through the force of attraction, right? It will connect very, very readily. And then you'll be able to like speedway on to great compassion. But you're not going to get to skip any of the steps, right? We have to cultivate all of these steps, this immeasurable compassion when we speak of it. What is immeasurable about it? Well, we're shooting it at all sentient beings who we can't measure because we don't have good measuring skills in our world that are big enough. It's like, so we have to get a compassion that's that big and a love that's that big. Like we need a love that like we can't even measure because it's just targeting every being that there is. Like, so these are the realizations that come before Bodhisattva, right? So we have to recognize that Bodhisattva, throwing the term around, they're Bodhisattvas, I'm a Bodhisattva. No. This is a being like who has renunciation for sure. Day and night wants to get out of samsara themselves. They have to have renunciation to get bodhicitta. Can't have one without the other. You can't get bodhicitta if you don't have renunciation. It's cause and effect. So this person wants to get out day and night, does nothing in the mind but get out of samsara. And then imagine if that kind of like saturated mind thought about nothing but becoming a Buddha for others, thought about nothing but wanting others to have happiness. All of them. So it's stages. And, you know, I mean, there's very few who are going to be on their deathbed as bodhisattvas. Very few. Sometimes a generation won't have one, right? Like the Dalai Lama, I remember used to teach all the time, and he'd be like, I know one bodhisattva. You know, this monk, Gen-Nima, different Gen-Nima, but he meditated in the jungle for like 20-something years. Dalai Lama called him out of the jungle. He lived at Ganden. I met him. Very strange character. I don't know. It's definitely not a normal individual. Very, very realized. And the Dalai Lama said he was the bodhisattva he knew about, right? So that's the rarity we're talking about. We're not talking about like, we know there's immeasurable bodhisattvas. The bodhisattvas come to help us. But like if things they are kind of appearing, they're probably kind of as they appear, right? I'm not a bodhisattva. I can say that for sure. I can't speak that of you, but if we all like out loud answered the question honestly with like, okay, you're not allowed if you're a bodhisattva to lie right now. You got to tell the truth. Are you a bodhisattva? I would be surprised if weren't drunk, right? If we all didn't say like, day and night, all I do is think about other sentient beings and freeing them. That's a big thing, right? I can only speak for myself, but we have to like ask that about ourselves. And do we day and night love all sentient beings? You know, do we see an enemy? You know, do we love them? Like this, it's slow. Like we talked about last week, the bodhisattva will give their eye, but we start by giving vegetables, you know? We give like a nice treat we give a quarter to someone homeless. We try our best within our capacity to be generous and to be ethical. And then we can perfect those things, right? It's all about perfecting those things, perfecting our ethics, perfecting our generosity, and perfecting our wisdom, perfecting all of these things. And the only way you perfect something is through practice. Like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? You practice, right? The only way you get to Buddhahood is practice. You have to. There's no other way. Like, you couldn't perfect a skill, right? Could you perfect a skill by not practicing it? I mean, it'd be absurd. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. It's in common talk. Like, oh, I'm gonna perfect something today and not practice it at all. Here I go, free will, right? It's just not how it works. It's a process of evolution, right? It just goes on and it grinds down, and more of our afflictions, if you will, they get dulled because the grasping that creates them gets dulled. I mean, that's really what it is. It's not like, oh, these afflictions are really just going away on their own. It's because our grasping that causes the afflictions to start is going away little by little, and it's dulling, right? The grasping itself and the self-cherishing is dulling. So now the whole world seems to be changing, but it's really us that's changing. It's Jeff's world that Jeff is making that's changing because Jeff is changing, right? So it's about that change process, that process of change.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and then when we look at, and this is the last thing I'll say, because it ties back to some of the other questions, and I think it's pertinent when I come up with something that maybe could clarify things, that it's good. Maybe this will confuse things more. But when we look at these perfections that we're perfecting, if you are reading about it in Tantra or you're reading about it in Sutra, they're different. The meaning of the perfection of generosity in highest Yoga Tantra is different than the meaning of the perfection of generosity in the sutra system, like how that's defined and what that means. So when we go back to this discussion that we had about the Prajnaparamita deity and this Galupa idea, not Galupa, it's not a Galupa idea, just it's the Indian Pandits that did it, right? What was going on at the time is we have a deity named Prajnaparamita, which is the perfection of wisdom. We have a deity called the perfection of generosity. We have a deity called the perfection of ethics. They're all females that I know about, right? They're in the cases that I'm aware of, they're females, right? There are probably males also, but when we look at in the cases that we have the perfection, all of these 10 perfections, and they're all manifest as beings. But what was trying to be made clear about the Heart Sutra is that Heart Sutra, where we have Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha, we have a mantra in there. And scholars or earlier people writing confused the deity that they found in the Tantrayana and this sutra text and thought that was Prajnaparamita's mantra. And that was it was not a sutra text. The Heart Sutra was secretly a tantra, and that the mantra in the Heart Sutra was Prajnaparamita's mantra. So what Rinpoche wasn't saying there's no deity named that, but it's just saying that the Heart Sutra itself and the mantra in the Heart Sutra itself is not a name mantra of a deity. It's a sutra teaching. Simultaneously, there was a Tantra teaching going on. It's called the Kala Chakra teaching. At the same time, Heart Sutra is being taught. Buddha emanated his Kala Chakra to Shambhala. But the Heart Sutra itself was the second turning of the wheel, was a sutra turning of the wheel, and that the mantra within it was a summary of the pathways presented in the Heart Sutra, was not a tantric mantra. The mantra itself was for a sharp capacity bodhisattva to be able to realize emptiness through a summarized version of the Heart Sutra. So the mantra in the Heart Sutra was merely a summary of the whole Heart Sutra for a sharp capacity bodhisattva, not a mantra or a name mantra of a deity. So they were just trying to separate these two worlds of Sutra and Tantra. So when we said before, in our system, there's not a Prajnaparamita deity, I feel by saying that, that's not saying it correctly. It's saying that in the Sutra system, the mantra that's in the Heart Sutra is not the Prajnaparamita mantra, Prajnaparamita deity's mantra. The Prajnaparamita deity has a different mantra, definitely. I don't ever want to present something that's not how we would want it presented, but that's what I've been able to discern at this point of why this distinction was made. The distinction was made to not confuse the meaning of the Heart Sutra with something else that was different. Now, of course, I mean, the meaning of the Heart Sutra, emptiness, and emptiness in Tantra and Sutra, emptiness is emptiness, right? So I mean, you can argue that too. And there are arguments that are made, right? Emptiness is emptiness. And, it's just the profound, it has levels. But the clear distinction was just trying to be made about the meaning of these sharp capacity, dull capacity bodhisattvas. Why a sharp capacity bodhisattva could just read a few lines and then see emptiness and wouldn't need, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. Sharp capacity bodhisattva would hear Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha and be able to see all of those pathways to the path of cessation. So anyway, I wanted to mention that because I just always want to make sure that we're like cleaning the gold, right? Making sure the gold is spotless or as clean as we can get it in our capacity. But there's not a lack of names of deities. You know, you find one name anything if you'd like. I mean, like every name that exists, you can find. It gets confusing, and it's especially confusing when there's the Sanskrit name, and then there's the Tibetan name, and then there's the English translation of the name. It becomes confusing. So hopefully I didn't confuse it more. Coleman, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, just kind of following up on Alessandra's question. You can't lose your bodhicitta once if someone has achieved the path of seeing, correct?
That's true. You can't lose your
Okay.
bodhicitta once you're at the medium level of the path of accumulation before you see emptiness.
Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to ask.
When a bodhisattva becomes a bodhisattva, they hit the path of accumulation. Path of accumulation has 3 levels, small, medium, and great. Once they get past the first level, they can't lose their bodhicitta. But a bodhisattva can lose his or her bodhicitta at the first stage of becoming a bodhisattva. They get discouraged or something, but the discouragement can't happen again after the second level of the path of accumulation. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
that's it. Do we got a concluding prayers or we do them? No, we didn't do prayers, did we? Everybody's frozen. No, right? Everyone froze right when I asked the question. I was like, do tell. Okay, the fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance.